The phone call that destroyed Linda's life came at exactly 3:47 in the morning. "Turn on the news." Her sister's voice was shaking. "Linda, they're talking about you on every channel. The whole world has seen what you did." Linda Turner sat up in bed, her heart racing. She grabbed the remote and turned on the television. Her own face filled the screen. The headline made her blood run cold. "Racist flight attendant attacks innocent passenger." But this story didn't start with that phone call. It started 12 hours earlier, on Flight 447 from Birmingham to Edinburgh. It started when Linda made the biggest mistake of her life. Hello friends, thank you so much for stopping by. Please support me by subscribing to my channel. Like and share this video to your family and friends. I truly appreciate your kind heart. So, let's begin. The morning sun was shining through the airplane windows as passengers boarded Flight 447. It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday flight. Nothing special, nothing memorable. But sometimes, ordinary days become extraordinary for all the wrong reasons. Ruby Williams walked down the airplane aisle, looking for seat 8B. She was 19 years old with bright eyes and a nervous smile. Her backpack was full of books, and her hands shook slightly as she checked her boarding pass for the third time. Ruby had never flown alone before. She was a university student studying to become a teacher. She was flying to Edinburgh to visit her older brother David, who worked at a big hospital there. David had sent her the plane ticket as a birthday gift. Ruby found her seat and sat down carefully. She put her backpack under the seat in front of her, just like the safety video had shown. She was so excited to see her brother again. Linda Turner was working her shift as a flight attendant that day. Linda was 45 years old with blonde hair and tired eyes. She had been working for the airline for 15 years. Usually, she liked her job, but today was different. Today, everything in Linda's life was falling apart. Her husband had left her 3 weeks ago. He took their car and half their money. Linda's teenage daughter barely spoke to her anymore. The bills were piling up on her kitchen table. Linda felt angry at the whole world. As Linda walked through the plane, checking on passengers, she saw Ruby sitting quietly in seat 8B. Ruby was reading a book about teaching children. She looked peaceful and happy. For some reason, seeing Ruby's happiness made Linda feel even more angry. "Excuse me," Linda said, stopping at Ruby's seat. Her voice was cold. Ruby looked up from her book. "Yes, ma'am?" "I need to see your boarding pass," Linda demanded. Ruby was confused but handed over the small piece of paper. "Is something wrong?" Linda looked at the boarding pass. Everything was correct. Ruby's name, the seat number, the flight number, everything matched perfectly. But instead of saying sorry and walking away, Linda felt her anger growing bigger. "This seat is taken," Linda lied. "You need to move." Ruby's eyes went wide. "But this is my seat number. My brother bought this ticket for me." "I don't care who bought it," Linda snapped. "Someone else is supposed to sit here. Go to the back of the plane." Ruby felt her cheeks get hot. Other passengers were starting to look at them. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake," Ruby said softly. "Can you please check again?" That's when Linda completely lost control of herself. "Don't tell me how to do my job," Linda shouted. "I've been working here for 15 years. I know more than some little girl." Ruby's eyes filled with tears. She had never been yelled at like this before. "I'm sorry," Ruby whispered. "I didn't mean to upset you." But Linda wasn't finished. "You people always think you can argue with us," Linda said loudly. "Well, not on my plane." The words, "you people," hit Ruby like a slap in the face. She knew exactly what Linda meant. Ruby felt sick to her stomach. An older man sitting across the aisle spoke up. "Excuse me, miss. The girl isn't doing anything wrong." Linda spun around to face him. "Mind your own business." But the man pulled out his phone and started recording. "Stop that," Linda screamed. "Put that phone away right now." But it was too late. Other passengers were also taking out their phones. They could see that something very wrong was happening. Linda turned back to Ruby, who was now crying quietly. "Get up," Linda ordered. "You're getting off this plane right now." Ruby shook her head. "Please, I just want to see my brother. I haven't done anything wrong." Linda reached down and grabbed Ruby's arm. Her fingers dug into the young woman's skin. "I said get up," Ruby tried to pull away. "You're hurting me." But Linda was stronger. She began dragging Ruby toward the front of the plane. "Help me!" Ruby cried out to the other passengers. "Please help me!" Some passengers looked uncomfortable. Others whispered to each other. But nobody stood up to help Ruby. They just kept recording with their phones. "This is wrong!" shouted a woman from the back of the plane. "Let her go!" But Linda ignored her. She dragged Ruby all the way to the airplane door. The pilot, Captain Mike Stevens, came out when he heard the noise. "What's happening here?" he asked. "This passenger is causing problems," Linda lied. She was breathing hard from dragging Ruby. "She needs to be removed." Captain Stevens looked at Ruby, who was sobbing now. "What did she do?" he asked. Linda paused. She couldn't think of a real answer. She was being rude to me," Linda finally said. "That's not true," Ruby cried. "I was just sitting in my seat." Captain Stevens looked confused. He could see that Ruby was just a young girl who was scared and crying. She didn't look like someone who would cause trouble. But Linda had worked for the airline longer than him. He didn't want to argue with her. "I'm sorry, miss," Captain Stevens said to Ruby. "If there's a problem, maybe it's better if you take another flight." Ruby couldn't believe what she was hearing. "This isn't fair," she sobbed. "I paid for this ticket. I just want to see my brother." Linda opened the airplane door. The morning air rushed in. "Get out," Linda said with a cruel smile. "And don't come back." Ruby looked at all the passengers watching her. Their phones were still recording. Some people looked sorry for her, but nobody was helping her. Ruby held her head up high. Even though she was crying, she tried to be brave. "My name is Ruby Williams," she said loudly so everyone could hear. "I want everyone to remember what happened here today. This is wrong." Then Ruby picked up her backpack and walked off the plane. Linda slammed the door shut. She thought she had won. She thought it was over. She had no idea that her life was about to be destroyed. As Flight 447 took off, the videos recorded by passengers were already being uploaded to the internet. Within minutes, the footage was on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. The hashtag Justice for Ruby started trending immediately. People around the world watched the video and felt sick. They saw a young, innocent girl being dragged off a plane for no reason. They heard Linda's cruel words. They saw Ruby's tears. The video had been viewed 1 million times within the first hour. By the time Linda's plane landed in Edinburgh, her face was all over the news. Shocking racism on British flight. Sky News. Flight attendant drags innocent student off plane. Daily Mail. Viral video shows airline discrimination. The Times. Linda had no idea any of this was happening. She finished her shift and went to her hotel room in Edinburgh. She was planning to have a quiet evening and fly back to Birmingham the next day. Instead, she got the phone call that changed everything. Meanwhile, Ruby was sitting in the Birmingham airport, crying and trying to figure out what to do. She called her brother David. "Ruby, what's wrong?" David's voice was worried. "Weren't you supposed to be on a plane?" Through her tears, Ruby told him everything that had happened. David was quiet for a long moment. Then his voice became very serious. "Ruby, I need you to listen to me carefully. What that woman did to you was against the law. We're going to make sure she faces consequences." "I just want to forget about it," Ruby said. "I feel so embarrassed." "No," David said firmly. "You have nothing to be embarrassed about. You did nothing wrong. That woman attacked you because of your race, and that's a crime." What Ruby didn't know was that her brother David wasn't just a hospital worker. Dr. David Williams was one of the youngest heart surgeons in Scotland. He was also married to Emma Williams, a famous lawyer who specialized in discrimination cases. And their father? Robert Williams was a retired judge who had spent 30 years fighting for civil rights. The Williams family was about to show Linda Turner what happens when you mess with the wrong people. By evening, the story was everywhere. But the biggest shock came when people discovered who Ruby really was. A reporter found Ruby's social media profiles. They discovered that she wasn't just any university student. Ruby Williams was studying at Oxford University, one of the best schools in the world. She had won a full scholarship because of her excellent grades. But that wasn't all. Ruby was also a volunteer at children's hospitals. She spent her free time reading to sick kids and helping them with their homework. She had started a program to give free books to poor children. The photo showed Ruby surrounded by smiling children. In every picture. She looked kind and gentle. This was the girl that Linda had dragged off a plane and called, "You people." When the full story came out, people became even more angry. Emma Williams, Ruby's sister-in-law, called a press conference. Standing next to her were some of the most powerful lawyers in Britain. "What happened to my sister-in-law yesterday was not just wrong," Emma said into the microphones. "It was a hate crime. We have clear video evidence of discrimination and assault." Emma looked directly into the cameras. "Linda Turner thought she could treat my sister-in-law badly because of the color of her skin. She was wrong. We are filing criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. This case will make sure that no other passenger ever has to go through what Ruby went through." The lead prosecutor, Mr. James Clark, stepped forward. "We will be pressing charges for assault, discrimination, and violation of civil rights. The video evidence is clear. This is one of the most obvious cases of racial discrimination we have ever seen." But Ruby herself had the biggest surprise of all. "I don't want money," she said at the press conference. Her voice was strong now, not scared like it had been on the plane. "I want change. I want to make sure this never happens to anyone else." Ruby paused and looked directly into the cameras. "Any money from this lawsuit will go to start a new organization. We're going to call it Equal Skies. We will help other people who face discrimination when they travel. We will also train airline workers to treat all passengers with respect." The crowd of reporters cheered. Even some of the police officers were clapping. Linda woke up in her Edinburgh hotel room to find her phone ringing non-stop. There were hundreds of missed calls and thousands of text messages. She turned on the television and felt like she was having a nightmare. Her face was on every news channel. The video of her dragging Ruby off the plane was playing over and over again. She could hear her own voice saying, "You people," and see Ruby's tears. Linda's phone rang. It was her boss at the airline. "Linda," his voice was cold. "You need to come to the office immediately when you get back to Birmingham." "Sir, I can't explain," Linda started. "There's nothing to explain," her boss interrupted. "The whole world has seen what you did. You're fired. Security will escort you from the building. Don't ever come back." Linda felt like she couldn't breathe. Her phone rang again. This time, it was her daughter. "Mom," her 17-year-old daughter's voice was full of shame. "My friends are showing me videos of you at school. How could you do something like that?" "Honey, let me explain." "No!" her daughter shouted. "I don't want to hear it. I'm staying at Dad's house. Don't call me." The phone went dead. Linda looked at herself in the hotel mirror. 24 hours ago, she had been just another airline worker. Now, she was the most hated woman in Britain. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "We know where you live, racist. You better watch your back." Linda started to cry. For the first time, she realized what she had really done. She had destroyed an innocent girl's dignity. She had acted like a monster, and now the whole world knew it. Linda returned to Birmingham to find reporters outside her house. She had to push through crowds of people shouting questions at her. "How do you feel about what you did? Do you think you're a racist? What do you want to say to Ruby Williams?" Linda said nothing. She ran into her house and locked the door. But her troubles were just beginning. The next morning, police officers came to her door. "Linda Turner," the officer said, "you are under arrest for assault and discrimination." Linda was handcuffed and taken to the police station. The photographers took pictures of her being put into the police car. At the police station, Linda met with a lawyer. "I have to be honest with you," the lawyer said. "This case is very bad for you. The video evidence is clear. Everyone in the country has seen what you did. The jury will not be sympathetic." "But I was having a bad day," Linda said. "My husband left me. I was stressed." The lawyer shook his head. "That's not a defense for what you did. You assaulted that girl because of her race. That's a serious crime." Linda spent 2 days in jail before she could pay bail to get out. When she got home, she found that someone had thrown eggs at her house. Her car had been scratched. Her neighbors wouldn't look at her. The airline was also in serious trouble. Ruby's family was suing them for millions of pounds. The company's stock price fell. Customers were canceling flights and boycotting the airline. The airline CEO had to make a public apology. "We are deeply sorry for the actions of our former employee," he said. "Linda Turner's behavior does not represent our values. We have fired her and we're implementing new training programs to make sure this never happens again." But the public wasn't satisfied. They wanted justice for Ruby. 6 months later, Linda's trial began. The courthouse was surrounded by protesters demanding justice. Ruby sat in the front row with her family. She looked calm and dignified. Linda couldn't even look at her. The prosecution played the video of the incident. Watching it again, Linda felt sick. She could see how cruel she had been. She could hear the hatred in her own voice. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor said, "you have seen the evidence with your own eyes. Linda Turner attacked Ruby Williams for one reason only: the color of her skin. This is exactly the kind of behavior that civil rights laws were created to prevent." Linda's lawyer tried to defend her. "My client was going through a difficult time in her personal life," he said. "She made a terrible mistake, but she's not a bad person." But the video spoke louder than any words. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Passenger after passenger testified about what they had seen. The pilot testified that Ruby had done nothing wrong. Ruby herself gave testimony that made everyone in the courtroom cry. "I was so excited to see my brother," she said quietly. "I had never flown alone before. I was nervous but happy. Then this woman started yelling at me for no reason. She grabbed me and dragged me off the plane like I was garbage." Ruby looked directly at Linda. "She made me feel worthless. She made me feel like I didn't belong anywhere. No person should ever be treated like that." Linda wanted to say she was sorry, but her lawyer told her not to speak. The jury took only 3 hours to reach their decision. Guilty on all charges. Linda was sentenced to 6 months in prison and 2 years of community service. She also had to pay Ruby's family pound 100,000-inch damages. But the real punishment was what happened to Linda's life. She couldn't get another job. Nobody would hire her because her face was too famous. She lost her house because she couldn't pay the mortgage. Her friends stopped talking to her. Her own family was ashamed of her. Linda had become a symbol of everything wrong with racism. She was the most hated woman in the country. While Linda's life fell apart, Ruby's life became amazing. The incident had made her famous around the world. Universities invited her to speak about discrimination. Television shows wanted to interview her. Publishers wanted her to write a book. But Ruby stayed focused on her mission. The Equal Skies organization grew quickly. Ruby raised millions of pounds to fight discrimination in travel. The organization opened offices in 20 cities across Britain. Ruby worked with airlines to create new training programs. She helped pass new laws to protect passengers' rights. She gave speeches at airports and travel companies. But most importantly, Ruby helped other people who had faced discrimination. A Pakistani man who was kicked off a plane for speaking Urdu, a disabled woman who was treated badly by airport security, a gay couple who were separated from their seats because of their relationship. Ruby helped them all get justice. "What happened to me was terrible," Ruby said in one of her speeches. "But I'm using that terrible experience to help other people. That's how we turn pain into power." Ruby also continued her studies at Oxford. She graduated with the highest grades in her class. She was accepted to the best teaching college in Britain. But Ruby had bigger plans now. "I want to become Minister of Education someday," she told a reporter. "I want to make sure that all children learn about respect and equality from a young age. I want to make sure that no child grows up to become like Linda Turner." Linda's 6 months in prison were the hardest months of her life. The other prisoners knew who she was. They had all seen the video. Most of them ignored her, but some were openly hostile. "You're that racist lady from the plane," one woman said to her on her first day. "I saw what you did to that poor girl. You should be ashamed." Linda was ashamed. She spent most of her time alone in her cell, thinking about what she had done. For the first time in her life, Linda really thought about racism. She had never considered herself a racist person, but watching the video of herself, she couldn't deny what she had become. A prison counselor named Dr. Sarah Johnson tried to help Linda understand her actions. "Why do you think you treated Ruby the way you did?" Dr. Johnson asked. Linda thought for a long time. "I was angry about my own life," she finally said. "My husband had left me. I felt like a failure. When I saw this young, successful girl, I guess I took all my anger out on her. But why did you focus on her race? Dr. Johnson pressed. Linda felt uncomfortable. I don't know, it made me feel powerful for a moment, like I was better than her. But you knew that was wrong. Yes, Linda whispered. I knew it was wrong even when I was doing it, but I couldn't stop myself. Dr. Johnson nodded. That's the first step toward healing. Admitting what you did and why you did it. Over the months, Linda began to understand something important. Her racism hadn't come from nowhere. It had grown from her own insecurities and failures. When she felt powerless in her own life, she had tried to feel powerful by hurting someone else. But understanding her actions didn't excuse them. Linda knew she had caused real harm to another human being. When Linda got out of prison, she had nowhere to go. Her house was gone. Her family wanted nothing to do with her. She was living in a small apartment and working at a grocery store for minimum wage. Linda had lost everything because of those few minutes on the airplane. One day, while Linda was working at the grocery store, a familiar face walked through the door. It was Ruby Williams. Linda felt her heart stop. Ruby looked older now, more confident. She was wearing a nice suit and carrying a briefcase. She looked successful and important. Ruby walked straight to Linda's checkout counter. She put a bottle of water on the counter and looked Linda in the eyes. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Hello, Linda, Ruby said quietly. Linda's hands were shaking as she scanned the water bottle. I don't know what to say, Linda whispered. Ruby looked at Linda carefully. Linda looked very different now. She had lost weight. Her hair was gray. Her clothes were old and cheap. She looked broken. I know who you are, Ruby said. I've been following your story. Linda felt tears coming to her eyes. I'm so sorry, Linda said. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am so sorry for what I did to you. Ruby studied Linda's face. She could see that the apology was real. Why did you do it? Ruby asked. I need to understand. Linda took a deep breath. I was angry about my own life, she said. I felt like a failure. When I saw you, young, successful, happy, I felt jealous. And instead of dealing with my own problems, I took my anger out on you. It was wrong. It was evil, and I've regretted it every single day since. Ruby listened carefully. Do you understand why what you did was so harmful? Ruby asked. Linda nodded. In prison, I had to think about it every day. I realized that you weren't just some random person to me. In that moment, you represented everything I felt I couldn't have. And because you were black, it was easy for me to make you a target for my anger. I used racism as a weapon because I felt powerless. Ruby was surprised by Linda's honesty. I've been working to fight discrimination for 3 years now, Ruby said. I've helped hundreds of people who were treated the way you treated me. Do you know what I've learned? Linda shook her head. I've learned that most racism comes from people who are hurting inside. Ruby continued. People who feel small try to make others feel smaller. People who feel powerless try to find someone they can have power over. Linda was crying now. That doesn't excuse what I did, Linda said. No, Ruby agreed. It doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. Ruby paid for her water and started to leave. Then she stopped and turned back. Linda, she said, have you ever thought about using your experience to help other people? Linda looked confused. What do you mean? You understand racism from the inside now, Ruby explained. You know what it feels like to be hated by everyone. You know what it's like to lose everything because of your actions. Maybe you could help other people avoid making the same mistakes you made. Linda stared at Ruby in shock. You would trust me to do that? Linda asked. Ruby thought for a moment. I don't trust you yet, she said honestly, but I believe people can change. If you really want to make up for what you did, prove it. Show the world that you've learned and grown. Ruby handed Linda a business card. This is the address of our Equal Skies office here in Birmingham. If you're serious about making amends, come see me next week. Then Ruby left, leaving Linda standing at the checkout counter with tears streaming down her face. Linda spent the next week thinking about Ruby's offer. Part of her was afraid. What if it was a trap? What if Ruby just wanted to humiliate her more? But a bigger part of Linda knew that this was her chance to do something good with her life. The following Tuesday, Linda walked into the Equal Skies office. It was a busy place, with young people working at computers and phones ringing constantly. Ruby was in a meeting when Linda arrived, but she came out to greet her. "You came," Ruby said simply. "I said I would," Linda replied. "What do you need me to do?" Ruby led Linda to a small conference room. "First," Ruby said, "I need to know that you're really committed to this. What I'm offering isn't easy. You'll have to face people who hate you. You'll have to relive your mistakes over and over again. Are you ready for that?" Linda nodded. "I've been living with the shame of what I did for 3 years. If I can use that shame to help someone else, then maybe some good can come from it." Ruby studied Linda's face carefully. "Okay," she said finally. "Here's what I'm proposing. We want to create a program where people who have committed acts of discrimination can share their stories with others. The goal is to prevent other people from making the same mistakes." Ruby pulled out a folder. "We've been contacted by schools, police departments, and companies who want this kind of training. They want to hear from someone who has actually been a racist, not just someone who studies racism. The best." Linda felt scared, but also hopeful. "You want me to tell my story?" she asked. "I want you to tell the truth," Ruby said, "about what you did, why you did it, and what it cost you. I want you to help other people understand what racism really looks like and where it comes from." Linda thought about it. "What if people don't believe that I've changed?" she asked. "Some people won't," Ruby said honestly. "Some people will always hate you for what you did, but some people will listen. And if we can prevent even one person from making the same mistake you made, then it will be worth it." Linda took a deep breath. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." Linda's first speaking engagement was at a police training academy. She was terrified. Standing in front of 50 police officers, Linda told her story. She explained how her personal problems had made her angry. She described how she had taken that anger out on an innocent person. She showed the video of herself dragging Ruby off the plane. The room was silent when she finished. Then, a young police officer raised his hand. "How do we know you're not just saying what you think we want to hear?" he asked. Linda had expected this question. "You don't," she said honestly. "You have no reason to trust me. But I'm not here asking for forgiveness or sympathy. I'm here to warn you. I'm here to show you what happens when you let your personal problems turn into hatred for other people." Linda looked around the room. "I lost everything because of 3 minutes of racism," she continued. "My job, my family, my home, my reputation. I spent 6 months in prison. I became the most hated woman in Britain. All because I couldn't control my anger and prejudice." Another officer spoke up. "Do you think you deserved what happened to you?" Linda thought carefully. "I deserved consequences for my actions," she said. "Ruby Williams deserved justice. But I also think that if someone had helped me understand my racism before I acted on it, maybe none of this would have happened." The training session lasted 3 hours. By the end, Linda could see that she had made an impact. The officers were asking thoughtful questions about unconscious bias and how to handle difficult situations without letting personal feelings interfere. After the session, the training instructor approached Linda. "That was powerful," he said. "I've never seen officers pay attention to diversity training like that before. When would you be available to come back?" Over the next year, Linda spoke at dozens of events. Schools, businesses, government offices, and community groups all wanted to hear her story. Linda's message was always the same. Racism doesn't come from evil people. It comes from ordinary people who let their fears and insecurities turn into hatred. "I wasn't born racist," Linda would tell her audiences. "I became racist because I was hurt and angry, and I chose to blame other people for my problems." Every person in this room has the capacity for both racism and kindness. The choice is up to you. Linda also worked with Ruby to create training materials for airlines. They developed a program that helped flight attendants recognize their own biases and treat all passengers with respect. The program was so successful that airlines around the world started using it. Meanwhile, Ruby's organization continued to grow. Equal Skies had helped over 10,000 people who had faced discrimination while traveling. Ruby had also been elected to the Birmingham City Council and was working on becoming a member of Parliament. But the most surprising development was the friendship that grew between Ruby and Linda. Working together every day, they had learned to trust each other. Ruby saw that Linda had genuinely changed. Linda saw that Ruby was not just forgiving, but truly wise and compassionate. "I never thought I would say this," Linda told a reporter, "but Ruby Williams is my best friend. She saved my life by giving me a chance to make amends." Ruby's response surprised everyone. "Linda Turner is living proof that people can change," Ruby said. "She's helped thousands of people understand racism and prevent discrimination. She's turned her worst moment into her life's mission." 5 years after the incident on Flight 447, Ruby and Linda were invited to speak at the International Conference on Civil Rights in London. Standing on the stage together, they told their story to an audience of world leaders, activists, and students. Ruby spoke first. "5 years ago, I was a 19-year-old student who just wanted to visit her brother. Instead, I became the victim of a racist attack that was seen by millions of people around the world." Ruby looked at Linda, who was standing beside her. "I could have let that experience make me bitter and angry. Instead, I chose to use it as motivation to fight discrimination and help other people." Then Linda stepped forward. "5 years ago, I was a 45-year-old woman who let her personal problems turn her into a racist bully. I attacked an innocent young woman because I was too weak to deal with my own issues." Linda's voice was strong and clear. "I lost everything because of my actions. I deserved to lose everything. But Ruby Williams gave me something I didn't deserve: a second chance. She taught me that redemption is possible, but only if you're willing to do the hard work of changing yourself." Linda looked out at the audience. "Today, I work with Ruby to fight the same kind of discrimination that I once participated in. We've trained over 50,000 airline employees, police officers, teachers, and business leaders. We've helped prevent countless acts of discrimination." Ruby stepped forward again. "Our story shows that justice doesn't always have to mean punishment. Sometimes, justice means transformation. Sometimes, the people who hurt us the most can become our strongest allies in fighting the problems they once represented." The audience gave them a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. After the speech, a young black woman approached them. "My name is Keisha," she said. "Last month I was treated badly by a security guard at an airport. I was angry and I wanted revenge. But after hearing your story, I think I want to try something different." Keisha looked at both women. "I want to help that security guard understand why what he did was wrong. I want to turn this into a teaching moment instead of just another fight." Ruby and Linda smiled at each other. "That's exactly what we hoped would happen," Ruby said. Keisha joined their program and went on to become one of their most effective trainers. Today, 10 years after the incident that shocked the world, Ruby Williams is a member of Parliament and one of the most respected civil rights leaders in Britain. She has written 3 books and has been awarded the Order of the British Empire for her work fighting discrimination. Linda Turner is the Director of Education at Equal Skies. She has spoken to over 500,000 people about racism and discrimination. She has helped create training programs that are used in 25 countries around the world. Their story has been turned into a documentary film that has been watched by millions of people. Universities use it to teach about redemption and social justice. The airplane where it all started has been retired, but there's a plaque in the Birmingham airport that tells their story. It reads, "In memory of Flight 447, where a moment of hatred became a lifetime of healing. Remember that every person deserves dignity, respect, and the chance to change." Ruby and Linda still work together every day. They have become one of the most effective teams in the fight against discrimination. "People always ask me if I really forgave Linda," Ruby said in a recent interview. "The answer is yes, but forgiveness didn't happen overnight. It was a choice I made every day for years. And it was worth it, because together, we've accomplished far more than either of us could have done alone." Linda's response is always the same. "Ruby didn't just forgive me," she says. "She saved me. She turned the worst thing I ever did into the best thing I've ever been part of. That's the power of redemption." Their organization has now helped over 100,000 people who have faced discrimination. They have trained over 1 million employees in businesses, schools, and government agencies. They have changed laws and policies around the world. But most importantly, they have shown that even the deepest wounds can heal, and even the worst enemies can become the best of friends. As Ruby often says in her speeches, the flight that was supposed to take me to Edinburgh ended up taking me on a journey I never could have imagined. Sometimes getting pushed off a plane is exactly what you need to learn how to soar. And Linda always adds, I thought I was ending Ruby's journey that day. Instead, she ended up saving mine. That's what happens when love wins over hate and hope wins over despair. Today, they continue their work, proof that redemption is real, forgiveness is powerful, and that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can become the beginning of our greatest contributions to the world. But their story doesn't end there. 10 years after that terrible day on Flight 447, something beautiful happened that nobody could have predicted. Linda's daughter, Jessica, who had refused to speak to her mother for years after the incident, finally reached out. Jessica was now 27 years old and working as a social worker. She had spent years being ashamed of her mother's actions. But watching Linda's transformation over the years had slowly changed her heart. "Mom," Jessica said when she called Linda one evening, "I've been thinking about everything that happened. I'm ready to talk." Linda cried when she heard her daughter's voice. They met at a small cafe in Birmingham. Jessica looked nervous but determined. "I was so angry at you for so long," Jessica said. "I was embarrassed to be your daughter. My friends at school saw that video. I felt like everyone was judging me for what you did." Linda nodded, tears in her eyes. "I know. I'm so sorry for the pain I caused you. But I've been watching what you've been doing with Ruby," Jessica continued. "I've seen how you've changed. I've seen how many people you've helped. And I realized something." Jessica reached across the table and took her mother's hand. "You taught me something important, even though you didn't mean to. You taught me that our worst mistakes don't have to define us. You showed me that people really can change if they're willing to do the work." Linda squeezed her daughter's hand. "I want to help," Jessica said. "I want to work with you and Ruby. I think my experience as your daughter gives me a unique perspective on how discrimination affects families." 6 months later, Jessica joined the Equal Skies team. She developed programs specifically for the children and families of people who had committed acts of discrimination. "We often forget that racism doesn't just hurt the victims," Jessica explained in her first presentation. "It also hurts the families of the people who act with prejudice. Children suffer when their parents make these choices. Spouses suffer. Everyone suffers." Jessica's programs helped hundreds of families heal from the damage caused by discrimination. Meanwhile, Ruby had gotten married to a wonderful man named Marcus, who was a doctor like her brother David. They had 2 beautiful children, a 5-year-old daughter named Hope and a 3-year-old son named Justice. Ruby often brought her children to the Equal Skies office. Hope and Justice loved Aunt Linda, as they called her. They had no idea about the history between their mother and Linda. To them, Linda was just another loving adult in their lives. One day, little Hope asked Ruby a question that made everyone in the office stop and think. "Mommy," Hope said, "why do some people not like other people because of their skin color?" Ruby knelt down to her daughter's level. "Well, sweetheart," Ruby said carefully, "sometimes people are scared of things they don't understand. And sometimes, when people are sad or angry about their own lives, they blame other people instead of trying to fix their problems." Hope thought about this. "Like when I'm mad at Justice and I'm mean to him even though he didn't do anything wrong?" she asked. "Exactly like that," Ruby said, smiling. "But you know what the amazing thing is?" "What?" Hope asked. "People can learn to be better. They can learn to be kind instead of mean. That's what Aunt Linda did. She used to be mean to people, but she learned how to be kind." Hope nodded seriously. "That's good," she said. "I like Aunt Linda. She reads me stories and makes funny voices." Ruby hugged her daughter and looked over at Linda, who was listening from across the room. Linda had tears in her eyes. Later that day, Linda approached Ruby. "Do you think we should tell them the truth someday?" Linda asked. "About what really happened between us." Ruby thought for a moment. "Yes," she said. "When they're old enough to understand, I think our story could teach them important lessons about forgiveness, redemption, and the power of change." "What if they hate me when they find out?" Linda asked. Ruby put her hand on Linda's shoulder. "They won't hate you," she said. "By the time they're old enough to understand, they'll have known you as a loving, kind person for years." They'll see that people can change. They'll see that your worst moment led to some of your best moments. As the years passed, Ruby and Linda's work spread far beyond Britain. Their training programs were being used in over 50 countries. Airlines around the world had adopted their policies. The United Nations invited them to speak about discrimination and reconciliation. But perhaps their greatest achievement was the Global Reconciliation Project they launched in partnership with universities worldwide. The project paired people who had experienced discrimination with people who had committed acts of discrimination. The goal was to create dialogue, understanding, and healing. We've learned that the best way to fight racism isn't just to punish it, Ruby explained to a gathering of world leaders. It's to transform it. When we bring victims and perpetrators together in a safe, structured environment, amazing things can happen. The project had helped over 10,000 pairs of people work through their conflicts and find common ground. One of their most successful cases involved a young Muslim woman named Fatima, who had been harassed at an airport, and the security guard Tom, who had targeted her because of his fears about terrorism. Through the program, Fatima and Tom spent months in mediated conversations. Tom learned about Fatima's life, her family, her dreams of becoming a nurse. Fatima learned about Tom's fears, which had grown from ignorance and media coverage of terrorist attacks. By the end of the program, Tom and Fatima had become friends. Tom now volunteers with refugee organizations, and Fatima speaks at security training seminars. Ruby and Linda showed us that enemies can become allies, Fatima said. If they could do it after what happened between them, anyone can do it. On the 15th anniversary of the Flight 447 incident, a major film studio released a documentary about Ruby and Linda's story. The film, called Flight to Redemption, featured interviews with both women, their families, and dozens of people whose lives had been changed by their work. The most powerful moment in the documentary came when they returned to Birmingham Airport and stood at the gate where Flight 447 had been boarding that day. "This is where it all started," Ruby said, looking around the familiar space. 15 years ago, I was a scared 19-year-old girl who just wanted to see her brother. Linda stood beside her, looking at the gate. And I was an angry, bitter woman who destroyed both of our lives in a moment of hatred, Linda said. If someone had told me then that this woman would become my best friend and closest colleague, I would have thought they were crazy. Ruby smiled. But that's the thing about life. It's full of surprises. The worst things that happen to us can become the seeds of the best things we ever do. The documentary won several awards and was watched by over 100 million people worldwide. It sparked conversations about racism, forgiveness, and redemption in families, schools, and communities everywhere. Ruby and Linda were approached by the Birmingham City Council to create a permanent exhibition about their story in the fight against discrimination. The Museum of Reconciliation opened 3 years later in the heart of Birmingham. The centerpiece of the museum was a replica of the airplane cabin where the incident had taken place. Visitors could sit in the seats and watch a recreation of what had happened. They could see how quickly a normal situation had turned into a crisis. They could understand how discrimination affects everyone involved. But the museum didn't just focus on the negative. It also showed the incredible work that Ruby and Linda had done together. It featured stories of the thousands of people they had helped. It showed how their reconciliation had inspired others around the world. The museum's most popular exhibit was called The Choice Point. It showed visitors moments in history where individuals had chosen between hatred and understanding, between revenge and reconciliation. Every day, we all face choice points, the exhibit explanation read. We can choose to respond to hurt with more hurt, or we can choose to respond with healing. Ruby Williams and Linda Turner show us what's possible when we choose healing. The museum welcomed over 500,000 visitors in its first year. School groups came from all over Europe to learn about discrimination and reconciliation. One visitor comment book entry particularly moved Ruby and Linda. I came here angry at someone who had hurt me. I left understanding that I have a choice to make. Thank you for showing me that forgiveness doesn't make me weak. It makes me strong. Anonymous. On the 20th anniversary of the Flight 447 incident, Ruby and Linda were preparing for a major celebration of their work. Equal Skies had grown into an international organization with offices on every continent. But the biggest surprise came from an unexpected source. Captain Mike Stevens, the pilot who had been on Flight 447 that day, contacted them. I need to speak with both of you, he said when he called. There's something I need to say that I should have said 20 years ago. Captain Stevens was now retired, but he still carried guilt about what had happened that day. When they met, he looked directly at Ruby. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I knew Linda was wrong that day. I could see that you were innocent, but I was a coward. I was afraid to stand up to her because she had seniority over me." Captain Stevens's eyes filled with tears. "I've regretted my silence every day for 20 years. I should have protected you. I should have done the right thing." Ruby and Linda exchanged a look. "Captain Stevens," Ruby said gently, "I appreciate your apology, but you know what? If you had stopped Linda that day, none of the good things that came after would have happened." Linda nodded. "Ruby's right. If you had intervened, I might never have faced the consequences of my actions. I might never have changed. Thousands of people might never have been helped." Captain Stevens looked confused. "Are you saying you're glad I didn't stop it?" he asked. "No," Ruby said. "What happened that day was terrible and traumatic, but sometimes terrible things lead to beautiful things. Your silence that day was wrong, but it was part of a chain of events that led to incredible healing and change." Ruby smiled at the older man. "The question isn't what you should have done 20 years ago. The question is what you can do now." Captain Stevens ended up joining their organization as a volunteer. He used his story to train other airline employees about the importance of speaking up when they witnessed discrimination. "I was a bystander to injustice," he would tell his audiences. "I learned that silence in the face of discrimination makes you part of the problem. Don't make my mistake. Find your courage and use your voice." Today, 25 years after that fateful day on Flight 447, Ruby Williams is serving her second term as a member of Parliament. She's being considered for a position in the Prime Minister's cabinet. Her children, Hope and Justice, are now teenagers who volunteer with Equal Skies and speak at schools about tolerance and acceptance. Linda Turner is now 70 years old and serves as the Senior Director of Global Operations for Equal Skies. She has spoken to over 2 million people in 60 countries. She has trained police forces, military units, school systems, and corporations on preventing discrimination. Jessica Turner has become one of the leading experts on family reconciliation. She has written 2 books about healing from the trauma of having a family member commit acts of discrimination. Their story has inspired countless others to choose reconciliation over revenge, understanding over hatred. Equal Skies now operates in 93 countries and has helped over 1 million people who have faced discrimination. The organization has also facilitated over 100,000 reconciliation conversations between victims and perpetrators of discrimination. But perhaps their greatest achievement is less measurable. They have changed how the world thinks about redemption and forgiveness. We get letters every day from people who tell us that our story helped them make a different choice. Ruby said in a recent interview, "People who chose to forgive instead of seeking revenge. People who chose to change instead of staying stuck in their hatred." Linda added, "The airplane incident lasted about 10 minutes, but the healing that came from it has lasted 25 years and will continue long after we're gone." As this incredible story shows us, the worst moments of our lives don't have to define us. They can transform us. Ruby Williams could have let that terrible experience on Flight 447 make her bitter and angry. Instead, she chose to use it as fuel for positive change. Linda Turner could have let her shame and guilt destroy her completely. Instead, she chose to do the hard work of transformation and redemption. Together, they proved that enemies can become friends, that hatred can be transformed into love, and that the people who hurt us the most can sometimes become our greatest allies in fighting the problems they once represented. Their story reminds us that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Discrimination hurts everyone involved. People can change if they're willing to do the work. Forgiveness is a choice that can lead to healing. The worst things that happen to us can become the seeds of the best things we do. Reconciliation is possible, even in the most difficult circumstances. Love really can conquer hate. The phone call that destroyed Linda's life at 3:47 the morning 25 years ago led to a journey neither woman could have imagined. A moment of hatred became a lifetime of healing. A flight that ended in tears became a journey that changed the world. And 2 women who started as enemies became living proof that redemption is real, forgiveness is powerful, and love always wins in the end. Sometimes the best stories really do start with the worst moments. And sometimes getting pushed off a plane is exactly what you need to learn how to soar. Dear friends, thank you so much for watching. Please support me by subscribing to my channel and don't forget to like and share this video. It means the world to me. Take care of yourself and never forget how much you're loved. I can't wait to see you in the next video. Sending you all my love.